When I was in labor with my first baby, my husband kept leaving the room to text someone. I thought he was just nervous about becoming a dad, but when a nurse handed me a receipt he dropped, I discovered he was buying expensive jewelry for another woman while I was giving birth to his child. That receipt didn't just expose his affair. It led to uncovering a massive crime ring that had stolen from dozens of innocent families. My husband wasn't just a cheater. He was a criminal who preyed on vulnerable parents in hospitals. What would you do if you found out your husband was destroying other families while you were bringing his baby into the world? And how far would you go to make sure he could never hurt anyone again? I'm going to tell you about the worst day of my life. The day I found out my husband was cheating on me while I was in the hospital, screaming through contractions, bringing our daughter into this world. My name is Marlena, and I thought I knew the man I married. It was 3:17 a.m. when the first real contraction hit me like a freight train. I'd been having false alarms for weeks, but this was different. This pain grabbed me by the spine and twisted until I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but grip the edge of our kitchen counter and wait for it to pass. "Devin!" I called out, my voice breaking. "Devin, it's time!" He stumbled out of our bedroom, hair messy, eyes still heavy with sleep. For a moment, he looked confused, like he'd forgotten I was 9 months pregnant and ready to pop at any second. "Are you sure?" he asked, checking his phone. "It's pretty early." Another contraction rolled through me and I doubled over. "Yes, I'm sure." Devin had been my everything for 6 years. We met in college when I was studying to be a teacher and he was working toward his business degree. He had these warm brown eyes that made me feel safe, and when he smiled, I felt like I was the only person in the room. The man who held my hair when I had morning sickness. The man who assembled our baby's crib at midnight because I'd had a panic attack about not being ready. But as we rushed to get ready for the hospital, something felt different. Off. "Did you grab the hospital bag?" I gasped between contractions. "Yeah, got it," he said. But he was looking at his phone again. Who checks their phone at 3 a.m. when their wife is in labor? The drive to Riverside General Hospital was a blur of pain and streetlights. Devin kept one hand on the steering wheel and one hand on his phone, which kept buzzing with notifications. "Can you please put that away?" I asked through gritted teeth. "I need you here with me." "Sorry, babe. Just work stuff," he mumbled. But he didn't put the phone down. Work stuff. At 3 a.m. on a Thursday. By the time we got to the hospital, my contractions were coming every 3 minutes. The nurses rushed me into a wheelchair and up to the maternity ward, Devin trailing behind, as me still glued to his phone. "First baby?" asked Nurse Patricia, a kind woman in her 50s with silver hair and gentle hands. "Yes," I managed to say between contractions. "We've been waiting for this for so long." She smiled warmly. "It's always special, the first one. Dad, you excited?" I looked over at Devin, expecting to see his face light up the way it had when we first found out. I was pregnant. Instead, I saw him typing on his phone, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Not the smile of a man about to become a father, something else entirely. "Devin," I said sharply. He looked up, startled. "What? Oh, yeah. Excited. Very excited." But his phone buzzed again, and his eyes immediately went back to the screen. The next few hours were a nightmare of pain, epidurals that didn't quite work, and a husband who seemed more interested in his phone than in the fact that his wife was bringing his child into the world. Every time a contraction hit, I reached for Devin's hand, but half the time he wasn't there. He kept stepping out to make calls and get coffee, but when he came back, something was different. His clothes smelled like perfume that wasn't mine, sweet and floral, nothing like the vanilla body spray I'd been wearing for years. "Devin, why do you smell like perfume?" I asked during a brief break between contractions. He looked genuinely confused. "Perfume?" I don't smell like perfume. Yes, you do. It's all over your shirt. He glanced down at his clothes, then shrugged. Must be from one of the nurses. You know how hospitals are. But I'd been in this hospital for hours now, and none of the nurses wore anything that sweet and cloying. At 6:30 a.m., the pain became unbearable. I was fully dilated and ready to push, but Devin had disappeared again. Nurse Patricia sent someone to find him, and when he finally came back, his hair was messed up and his shirt was wrinkled in a way that made my stomach drop. "Where were you?" I demanded. "Bathroom," he said quickly. "Sorry, I was feeling sick." But he didn't look sick. He looked satisfied, like a man who'd just gotten something he wanted. "Okay, Marlena," said Dr. Rodriguez, settling between my legs. "It's time to meet your baby. When the next contraction comes, I want you to push with everything you've got." The next 20 minutes were the hardest of my life, not just because of the physical pain, but because every time I looked at Devin, I saw a stranger. He was holding my hand, saying the right words, but his heart wasn't in it. His mind was somewhere else entirely, or with someone else entirely. At 6:42 a.m., our daughter entered the world with a loud, angry cry that filled the room with the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. "She's perfect," Dr. Rodriguez said, placing the tiny, squirming baby on my chest. "Absolutely perfect." I looked down at our daughter, my daughter, and felt a love so fierce and immediate that it took my breath away. She was red and wrinkled and covered in goo, but she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Her tiny fingers were all ready, grasping at the air, and when she opened her eyes, they were the same dark brown as Devin's. "Hi, baby girl," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Hi, Sophia. Mommy's here." I looked up at Devin, expecting to see him crying too, expecting to see that same overwhelming love reflected in his face. Instead, I saw him texting someone. Texting, while his daughter took her first breaths. "Devin," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. He looked up, and for just a second, I saw something that looked like guilt flash across his face. "Sorry, I was just telling everyone the good news." But the expression on his face wasn't the joy of a new father sharing happy news. It was the secretive smile of a man sending a message he didn't want his wife to see. That's when Nurse Patricia approached my bed. She'd been in and out of the room all morning, helping with the delivery, checking on me and the baby. But now she looked troubled, like she was wrestling with something difficult. "Mrs. Chen," she said softly, her voice careful and measured. "There's something you need to see." She was holding something in her hand, but I was still holding Sophia, still processing the overwhelming emotions of becoming a mother, still trying to figure out why my husband seemed more interested in his phone than in his newborn daughter. "What is it?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Something in Nurse Patricia's eyes told me that whatever she was about to show me would change everything. Devin had stepped out again, claiming he needed to call his boss about taking paternity leave. But it was 7 a.m. on a Thursday. His boss wouldn't even be awake yet. Nurse Patricia glanced toward the door, making sure Devin was gone, then looked back at me, with an expression that was part sympathy, part determination. "Your husband dropped this when he was rushing out. Earlier," she said, holding out what looked like a small piece of paper. "I wouldn't normally look, but it fell open and—" She paused, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm sorry, honey, but I think you need to see this." I stared at the paper in her hand, my heart starting to race. Sophia made a small sound in my arms, and I automatically began to rock her, but my eyes were fixed on whatever Nurse Patricia was holding. Whatever it was, I knew it was about to destroy the life I thought I had. I was still holding Sophia, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, when Nurse Patricia stepped closer to my bed. The room felt different now, like the air had gotten thicker, harder to breathe. Devin had stepped out again, claiming he needed to call his boss about taking paternity leave. But something told me that wasn't where he'd gone. "What is it?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Sometimes ignorance feels safer than truth. Nurse Patricia looked uncomfortable, like she was carrying a weight she didn't want to bear. She'd been a labor and delivery nurse for 25 years, she told me later, and she'd seen a lot of things. But what she was about to show me was something that would haunt both of us. "Your husband dropped this when he was rushing out earlier," she said, holding out what looked like a small piece of paper. "I wouldn't normally look, but it fell open and—" She paused, her voice gentle, but firm. "I'm sorry, honey." It was a receipt. Not just any receipt, but one from Henderson's Jewelry, the fancy store downtown where Devin and I had bought my engagement ring 3 years ago. The timestamp showed yesterday, June 11th, 2025, the day before I went into labor. He'd bought something expensive, very expensive. My heart started racing as I read the details. A necklace, white gold with sapphires, $800. $800. I stared at the numbers, trying to make sense of them. We'd been saving every penny for the baby. We'd been eating ramen noodles for dinner 3 nights a week so we could afford the crib and car seat. I'd been wearing the same 3 maternity outfits for months because we couldn't spare money for new clothes. But Devin had spent $800 on jewelry. Yesterday. This isn't for me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I knew every piece of jewelry Devin had ever bought me. My engagement ring, the simple wedding band, the small pearl earrings for our first anniversary. This wasn't for me. Nurse Patricia's expression grew even more troubled. "There's more," she said gently. She handed me Devin's business card holder, which had apparently fallen out of his pocket, along with the receipt. My hands were shaking as I opened it, Sophia still sleeping peacefully in my arms, completely unaware that her world was falling apart before she'd even been in it for 2 hours. Inside the card holder, mixed in with Devin's own business cards, was something that made my blood run cold. Another business card, but not his. It belonged to someone named Isabella Martinez, with a title that read, Marketing Director, Martinez and Associates. But it wasn't the card itself that destroyed me. It was what was written on the back, in Devin's familiar handwriting. "Can't. Wait to see you wearing it. D." The room started spinning. I felt like I was falling, even though I was lying in a hospital bed. Sophia made a small sound in my arms, and I realized I was holding her too tightly, my body trembling with shock and rage, and a pain that was somehow worse than the labor I'd just endured. This beautiful, innocent baby who had just entered the world, and she was born into a lie. "I'm so sorry," Nurse Patricia whispered, her hand gentle on my shoulder. "I debated whether to tell you, but if it were me, I'd want to know." I couldn't speak, couldn't think. The physical pain of childbirth was nothing compared to this. This felt like being ripped apart from the inside, like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it stopped beating. $800 for another woman, while I was pregnant with his child. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I couldn't even process it. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake. This was planned, deliberate. He'd gone to the jewelry store, picked out something, expensive and beautiful, and written a love note to another woman. All while I was at home, 9 months pregnant, preparing to give birth to his daughter. "When did he drop these?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "About 20 minutes ago, when he rushed out to make that phone call. They fell out of his pocket when he was pulling out his phone." His phone. The phone he'd been glued to all morning. The phone that kept making him smile in ways that had nothing to do with becoming a father. That's when Devin walked back into the room, all fake smiles and pretend excitement. He looked relaxed, almost happy, like whatever he'd been doing had put him in a good mood. "How are my girls doing?" he asked, completely oblivious to what had just happened. He walked over to the bed, like nothing had changed, like he was still the devoted husband and father he'd been pretending to be. But I could see him clearly now. The man I'd trusted with my heart, my future, my dreams, the father of the baby I was holding, and he was a complete stranger. "Devin," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Who's Isabella?" I watched his face change. The color drained from his cheeks so fast I thought he might faint. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. His eyes darted to the receipt and business card in my hand, then back to my face. That look told me everything I needed to know. "Marlena, I can explain," he started, but his voice cracked on the words. "Can you?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but I felt a strength I didn't know I had. Maybe it was becoming a mother. Maybe it was pure adrenaline. But I wasn't going to let him lie to me anymore. Not here. Not now. Not while I was holding his daughter. Nurse Patricia had quietly stepped away, giving us privacy but staying close enough that I felt safe. I learned later that she'd positioned herself where she could see everything, in case I needed help. She'd seen this before. Husbands who thought they could get away with anything because their wives were vulnerable, exhausted, dependent. But Devin had made a crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. "Sit down," I said, nodding toward the chair beside my bed, "and tell me the truth, all of it." He sat down heavily, like his legs couldn't support him anymore. He put his head in his hands, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I looked down at Sophia, sleeping peacefully in my arms, and the fury came back, stronger than ever. This innocent baby deserved better than a father, who would rather be shopping for another woman than preparing for her birth. "How long?" I asked. Devin looked up at me, tears starting to form in his eyes, but I felt nothing for his tears. He'd made his choices. "Marlena, please, let me explain. The whole situation. How long, Devin?" The silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of Sophia's soft breathing and the beeping of medical equipment. I stared at this man I'd loved for 6 years, the man whose name I'd taken, whose child I'd just brought into the world, and waited for him to destroy what was left of our life together. 3 months, he finally whispered. 3 months. I was 6 months pregnant when this started. Dealing with morning sickness that lasted all day, swollen feet, constant exhaustion, and the overwhelming fear that comes with your first pregnancy. I was growing his child inside my body, and he was starting an affair. "The necklace?" I asked, holding up the receipt. Devin's voice was barely audible. "It's her birthday today." Today. While I was giving birth to his daughter, he was thinking about another woman's birthday. The cruelty of it took my breath away. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Sophia's soft breathing and the steady beeping of medical equipment. I stared at Devin, waiting for him to say something that would make this make sense. But there was nothing he could say that would fix this. "Have you been with her this whole time?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "All those late nights? At work? All those business trips?" Devin kept his head in his hands, but I saw him nod. Just a small movement, but it confirmed what I already knew in my heart. "Were you with her last night?" "Last night, while I was having early contractions, and telling him I thought the baby was coming. Soon, he'd said he had to finish a project at the office. He'd kissed my forehead and promised he'd be back in a few hours. I'd fallen asleep on the couch waiting for him, and when I woke up at 3 a.m. in full labor, he'd been in our bed, supposedly asleep. but his clothes had been in a pile on the floor, and they'd smelled like that same sweet perfume. "Yes," he whispered. The word hit me like a physical blow. While I was scared and uncomfortable, feeling our daughter moving inside me, preparing for the biggest moment of our lives, he'd been with another woman. He'd been celebrating her birthday while I was getting ready to give birth to his child. I looked down at Sophia, so perfect and innocent, and felt a fierce protectiveness rise up in me. This beautiful baby girl deserved so much better than this. "Do you love her?" The question came out before I could stop it. I'm not sure why I asked. Maybe I needed to know if this was just physical, or if he'd actually given his heart to someone else. Devin looked up at me then, and I saw something in his eyes that broke whatever was left of my heart. It wasn't shame or regret, or even guilt. It was confusion, like he was trying to figure out the answer to a difficult math problem. "I don't know," he said finally. "I think so. Not even the decency to lie. Not even the mercy of pretending this was just a mistake, just something that happened." He thought he loved her. The man I'd married, the father of my newborn daughter, thought he was in love with another woman. And he was telling me this while I held his child, less than an hour after she'd been born. "Get out," I said, quietly. "Marlena, please. We can work through this. Think about Sophia." I looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw someone I didn't recognize. This wasn't the man who'd held my hand during morning sickness. This wasn't the man who'd spent hours assembling the crib and painting the nursery. This was a stranger wearing my husband's face. "I am thinking about Sophia," I said, looking down at our daughter's perfect face. "I'm thinking that she deserves better than a father who would rather be with another woman than welcome her into the world." "This is my daughter too," he said, his voice getting defensive. The audacity of it stunned me. He was acting like he had rights, like he deserved consideration after what he'd just admitted. "Then you should have thought about that before you decided to spend her birthday celebrating." "Another woman's birthday," I said. Devin stood up, and for a moment, I thought he might actually fight for us, might apologize and beg for forgiveness and promise to end things with Isabella and try to save our family. Instead, he said, "I'll come back later when you've had time to calm down." Calm down. Like I was being hysterical. Like discovering your husband's affair while holding your newborn baby was something you just needed to calm down about. "No," I said firmly. "You won't. You'll leave now, and you won't come back until I say you can." "You can't keep me from my daughter," he said, but he was already backing toward the door. "Watch me." After he left, the room felt different. Quieter, but not in a peaceful way. More like the silence after. A bomb goes off when you're trying to figure out what's left standing. I held Sophia close and tried to process what had just happened. My marriage was over. That much was clear. But looking at my daughter, I realized something else. I didn't just want to survive this. I wanted to come out stronger. Nurse Patricia came back about 10 minutes later. She looked around the room, noticing that Devin was gone. "How are you doing, honey?" she asked gently. "I honestly don't know," I said. "But I think I'm going to be okay. We're going to be okay." She smiled, but it was a sad smile. "You're stronger than you know. I've seen a lot of women go through situations like this, and the strong ones always find a way forward." "Have you really seen this before?" Patricia sat down in the chair Devin had vacated. "More often than you'd think. There's something about childbirth that brings out the truth in people. Some men rise to the occasion and become the partners their wives need them to be. Others," she gestured toward the door, "others show you who they really are." I thought about that. Maybe this wasn't just about Devin having an affair. Maybe this was about him showing me his true character at the moment when I needed him most. I need to call my sister, I said. And I need to figure out what I'm going to do about the house and money, and I felt overwhelmed thinking about all the practical things that would need to be handled. One thing at a time, Patricia said. Right now, you focus on healing and bonding with this beautiful baby. Everything else can wait. But even as she said it, I knew that wasn't entirely true. Devin had been planning something, and I needed to figure out what it was before he could do any more damage. Patricia, I said, when Devin was here earlier, did he say anything to you about plans or arrangements? She looked thoughtful. Now that you mention it, he did ask some strange questions. He wanted to know about discharge procedures, about how long you'd be in the hospital, about whether there were any legal requirements for fathers to be present for discharge. My blood ran cold. Why would he be asking about that unless he was planning something? He also asked about the birth certificate process, she continued, specifically about whether both parents had to sign it. I felt sick. Devin wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning something that involved Sophia. I think I need that phone call now, I said. As Patricia helped me reach my phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that Devin's confession was just the beginning. There was more to this story, and I was about to find out exactly how deep his betrayal went. My sister Emma answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting for my call. Marlena, how's the baby? How are you feeling? I've been waiting for updates all morning. Emma, I said, and something in my voice must have told her everything she needed to know. What's wrong? Her tone shifted immediately from excitement to concern. Is the baby okay? Are you okay? The baby's perfect, I said, looking down at Sophia's peaceful face. But Devin, I couldn't finish the sentence. What about Devin? Marlena, you're scaring me. So I told her. Everything. The strange behavior during labor, the phone calls, the perfume smell, the receipt, Isabella's business card with Devin's love note. By the time I finished, Emma was silent on the other end of the line. That son of a bitch, she finally said. Emma was a lawyer who specialized in family law, and she didn't shock easily, but I could hear the anger in her voice. I'm coming to the hospital right now. Emma, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Don't make any decisions about anything until I get there. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. And don't let him back in that room. After I hung up, Patricia came back with a troubled expression on her face. Marlena, honey, I hate to bother you with this, but there's something else you need to know. My stomach dropped. What now? After your husband left, he was in the family waiting room making phone calls. I wasn't trying to listen, but he was being loud. And what I heard? She paused, looking uncomfortable. I think you need to know. She told me that Devin had been talking to someone, telling them that he'd be there for dinner as soon as this whole thing was over. He'd referred to the birth of his daughter as this whole thing. But that wasn't the worst part. He told whoever he was talking to that once you were home and settled, he was going to file for divorce. He said he'd already talked to a lawyer. The room tilted. He'd already been planning to leave me. The affair wasn't just a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was a calculated decision to end our marriage, and he'd been planning it while I was pregnant with his child. There's more, Patricia said gently, and I wasn't sure I could handle more. He mentioned something about the house. Our house, the little 3-bedroom home we'd bought 2 years ago, the one we'd spent months painting and decorating for the baby, the one where I'd planned to raise Sophia, where I'd imagined our family growing and thriving. What about the house? I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. He said something about it being in his name only, and that you'd have to find somewhere else to live. My blood ran cold. The house was in his name only because his credit score had been better when we applied for the mortgage. I'd trusted him when he said it didn't matter whose name was on the papers because we were married, because we were a team, because we were building a life together. How naive I'd been. He also mentioned something. About you not having access to the bank accounts, Patricia continued. He said something about protecting his assets. I felt like I was drowning. Not only had Devin been having an affair, not only had he been planning to leave me, but he'd been systematically setting me up to have nothing. No house, no money, no security. Just me and a newborn baby with nowhere to go. That's when I realized how carefully this had all been planned. The house in his name only. The bank accounts that he controlled. The way he'd insisted I cut back my hours at work during the pregnancy, saying he wanted me to rest and take care of myself. I'd thought he was being considerate. Now I realized he'd been making me financially dependent on him. Marlena, Patricia said gently, "There's one more thing, and this one is going to be hard to hear." I looked at her, wondering what could possibly be worse than what I'd already learned. He mentioned something about custody arrangements. He said he was going to fight for full custody of the baby. The words hit me like a physical blow. Full custody. He wanted to take Sophia away from me. He can't do that, I said. But even as I said it, I realized I didn't actually know what he could or couldn't do. Can he? Patricia looked grim. I don't know the legal details, but I do know that courts usually prefer to keep babies with their mothers, especially newborns who are breastfeeding. But Devin had been planning this for months. He'd had time to research, to prepare, to figure out exactly how to hurt me in the worst possible way. That's when Emma burst through the door, her face flushed from running through the hospital corridors. "Where is he?" she demanded. "Gone," I said. "For now." Emma sat down and pulled out a legal pad. "Okay, start from the beginning. Tell me everything again, and don't leave out any details." As I repeated the story, Emma took notes, asking questions about dates, and times and specific things Devin had said. Her expression grew darker with each detail. "This isn't just an affair, Marlena," she said when I finished. "This is systematic financial and emotional abuse. He's been planning this for months, maybe longer." "But why?" I asked. "If he wanted to leave, why didn't he just leave? Why go through all this?" Emma looked at me with the serious expression she wore in court. "Because he wanted to have his cake and eat it too. He wanted his affair, but he also wanted to make sure he came out of the divorce with everything. The house, the money, maybe even the baby." I felt sick. Can he really take Sophia? "Not if I have anything to say about it," Emma said grimly. "But we need to move fast. If he's already talked to a lawyer, he's probably already started the paperwork." That's when Patricia spoke up. "There's something else. When he was asking about the birth certificate process, he seemed very interested in the details. Almost like he was planning something." Emma and I looked at each other. "What kind of something?" Emma asked. "I'm not sure," Patricia said. "But in my experience, when a father starts asking detailed questions about legal procedures right after his child is born, it's usually not for innocent reasons." Emma stood up and paced to the window. "We need to assume he's going to try something. Maybe try to take the baby before you're discharged, or file for emergency custody, or..." She paused. "Marlena, do you have anywhere safe you can go when you leave the hospital?" I realized I didn't. The house was in Devin's name. I had some money in our joint checking account, but if he froze it, I'd have nothing. My parents lived across the country, and I couldn't travel with a newborn. "She can stay with me," Emma said, reading my expression. "It's not ideal, but it's safe." But even as we made plans, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something. Devin had been planning this for months. He was too smart, too calculating to have overlooked anything. "Emma," I said, "what if there's more? What if the affair and the divorce plans are just part of something bigger?" My sister looked at me seriously. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we don't know the whole story yet?" As if summoned by my words, Patricia's phone buzzed. She looked at it, frowned, then looked up at us with an expression that told me my worst fears were about to be confirmed. "That was security," she said. "Your husband is back, and he's not alone." My heart started racing. I instinctively pulled Sophia closer to my chest, my protective instincts kicking in stronger than I'd ever felt them before. "Who's with him?" Emma asked, already moving toward the door. Patricia checked her phone again. "Security says it's a woman and an older man in a suit. They're asking to see you and the baby." Emma and I exchanged glances. A woman, probably Isabella. But who was the man in the suit? "Don't let them in," Emma said firmly. "Marlena doesn't have to see anyone she doesn't want to see." But even as Patricia nodded and headed toward the door, I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach. Devin wouldn't have brought people with him unless he had a plan. And knowing what I now knew about how calculating he'd been, that plan was probably going to hurt me in ways I hadn't even imagined yet. "Emma," I said, "I think I should see them." "Absolutely not. You just gave birth. You're emotional and vulnerable. And whatever game Devin is playing—" "That's exactly why I need to see them," I interrupted. "I need to know what he's planning before he has a chance to put it into action." Emma looked like she wanted to argue, but she knew me well enough to recognize when my mind was made up. "Fine, but I'm staying right here, and if I don't like what I'm hearing, I'm ending this conversation." Patricia came back a few minutes later, looking troubled. "They're insisting on seeing you. The man says he's a lawyer and that this is a legal matter that can't wait." A lawyer. Devin had brought a lawyer to the hospital while I was still recovering from giving birth to his child. "Let them in," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "But Patricia, can you stay? I'd feel better with you here." She nodded and positioned herself near the emergency call button. Emma moved to stand protectively beside my bed. I adjusted Sophia in my arms and prepared to face whatever fresh hell Devin was about to unleash. Devin walked in first, and I barely recognized him. Gone was the nervous, guilty man who'd confessed to his affair just a few hours ago. This Devin looked confident, almost smug, like a man who held all the cards and knew it. Behind him came a woman I assumed must be Isabella, though she looked nothing like I'd expected. She was beautiful, yes, but in a cold, polished way. Expensive. Clothes, perfect makeup, the kind of woman who looked like she'd never had a hair out of place in her life. She was also noticeably pregnant, maybe 5 or 6 months along. My world tilted again. Isabella was pregnant. The third person was indeed a lawyer, an older man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase. He looked like the kind of attorney who charged $1,000 an hour and won cases by intimidation. "Marlena," Devin said, his voice artificially warm, "I'd like you to meet Isabella Martinez and my attorney, Robert Brennan." I stared at Isabella's pregnant belly, trying to process what I was seeing. "How far along are you?" I asked. Isabella looked uncomfortable, but Devin answered for her. 5.5 months. 5.5 months. Devin had been having an affair for 3 months, he'd told me, but Isabella was 5.5 months pregnant. "You lied," I said, looking directly at Devin. "You said this started 3 months ago." "Actually," the lawyer interrupted, "that's part of why we're here. There are some things that need to be clarified." Emma stepped forward. "I'm Marlena's attorney. Whatever you have to say, you can say it to me." Mr. Brennan looked surprised. I wasn't aware Mrs. Chen had retained counsel. She has now, Emma said coldly. So why don't you tell us why you thought it was appropriate to bring legal representation to harass a woman who gave birth this morning? We're not here to harass anyone, Brennan said smoothly. We're here to discuss custody arrangements and to present Mrs. Chen with some information that might affect her decisions going forward. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Mr. Chen has asked me to file for divorce and full custody of the minor child. We're prepared to offer Mrs. Chen a generous settlement if she's willing to relinquish her parental rights voluntarily. The room went dead silent. Even Patricia looked shocked. Excuse me? Emma said, her voice dangerously quiet. We understand this is difficult, Brennan continued. But Mr. Chen believes it would be in everyone's best interest, including the child's, if custody matters were settled quickly and amicably. I found my voice. You want me to give up my daughter? We want to offer you a way to start fresh, Devin said, speaking for the first time since the introductions. You're young, Marlena. You can have other children, build a new life. But Isabella and I, we're building a family together. A family. With his pregnant mistress, while trying to take my newborn daughter away from me. And if I refuse? I asked. Brennan pulled out another set of papers. Then we'll be forced to pursue full custody through the courts. And I should warn you, Mrs. Chen, we have evidence that might make that process difficult for you. What kind of evidence? Emma demanded. Isabella spoke for the first time. Video evidence of Marlena being unstable during her pregnancy, threatening Devin, having emotional outbursts, showing signs of mental instability that could endanger the child. I stared at her in shock. That's not true. None of that is true. We have recordings, Devin said, pulling out his phone. Audio of you screaming at me, threatening to leave, saying you weren't sure you wanted the baby. Isabella witnessed some of these incidents. My mind raced back through the past few months. Yes, I'd been emotional during pregnancy. Yes, we'd had arguments. But Devin was twisting everything, making normal pregnancy emotions sound like mental illness. You recorded me? I whispered. I was concerned about your mental state, Devin said. I thought I might need evidence to protect our child. The manipulation was breathtaking. He'd been planning this for months, recording our private conversations, twisting my words, building a case against me while I'd been completely unaware. There's more, Brennan said, pulling out financial documents. Mr. Chen has been the sole financial provider for the household. Mrs. Chen has no independent income, no savings, no way to provide for the child. The house is in Mr. Chen's name, as are all the vehicles and bank accounts. Everything they were saying was technically true, but they were leaving out the context. Devin had encouraged me to cut back my hours. He'd insisted on handling all the finances. He'd convinced me to trust him with everything. We're prepared to offer Mrs. Chen $50,000 to relinquish her parental rights, Brennan continued, plus coverage of her medical expenses and a grace period to find alternative housing. $50,000 to give up my daughter, to walk away from the most important thing in my life so Devin could play house with his pregnant mistress. Get out, I said quietly. Marlena, think about this rationally, Devin said. You can't take care of a baby by yourself. You have nothing. No money, no home, no job. What kind of life can you give her? I looked down at Sophia, sleeping peacefully in my arms, and felt something fierce and protective rise up in me. A better life than she'd have with a father who thinks she's disposable, I said. Get out, all of you, now. As they filed out, Brennan left the papers on my bedside table. The offer stands for 48 hours, he said. After that, we file for emergency custody. After they left, the room felt poisoned by their presence. Emma was already on her phone, presumably calling backup. Patricia was checking Sophia's vitals, more for something to do than because it was necessary. But I couldn't stop staring at the papers they'd left behind. Devin hadn't just been planning to leave me. He'd been planning to take everything from me, including my daughter. And now I had 48 hours to figure out how to stop him. Emma was already on her phone, pacing the small hospital room like a caged animal. She was calling in favors, talking to other lawyers, building our defense strategy. But I could see the worry in her eyes. Devin had been planning this for months. We had less than 2 days. "We need to find holes in their story," Emma said after hanging up her latest call. "Inconsistencies, lies, anything we can use to show the court that Devin isn't the devoted father he's pretending to be." Patricia had been unusually quiet since Devin and his entourage left. She was tidying the room, but I could tell she was thinking about something. "Patricia," I said, "what is it?" She stopped folding blankets and looked at me. Something didn't feel right about that woman. Isabella. "What do you mean?" "I've been a labor and delivery nurse for 25 years. I know what pregnant women look like at different stages, and I know what they look like when they're lying." Emma stopped pacing. "You think she was lying about something?" "I think she was lying about everything," Patricia said firmly. "The way she stood, the way she avoided looking at you directly, the way she let Devin speak for her most of the time. That's not how a woman acts when she's fighting for the man she loves." I thought back to Isabella's behavior during their visit. She had seemed uncomfortable, almost reluctant to be there. And when Devin was talking about their family, she hadn't looked happy. She'd looked scared. "There's something else," Patricia continued. When she mentioned the recordings, the way she said it, it sounded rehearsed, like someone had told her exactly what to say. A knock on the door interrupted us. We all tensed, expecting Devin to return with more threats. Instead, a young woman in scrubs peeked in. "Mrs. Chen, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent." Emma moved protectively toward the door. "Who is it?" "She says her name is Isabella Martinez. She's alone, and she looks upset." I stared at the nurse in confusion. Isabella was back? Without Devin or the lawyer? "Should I tell her you're not available?" the nurse asked. I looked at Emma, who shook her head vigorously, but something in my gut told me this might be important. "Let her in," I said. "But Emma, stay close." Isabella walked in alone, and she looked completely different than she had an hour ago. Her perfect makeup was smeared with tears, her expensive clothes were wrinkled, and her hands were shaking. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I needed to see you. I needed to tell you the truth." Emma stepped forward. "If this is some kind of trick—" "It's not," Isabella said quickly. "Please, please let me explain." She sat down heavily in the chair beside my bed, and I could see that she was crying. "I lied to you earlier," she said, "about everything. Devin made me come here, made me say those things, but I can't do it anymore. I can't be part of this." I held Sophia closer, not sure whether to trust this sudden change of heart. "What do you mean, he made you?" Isabella looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "You have to understand. I thought you were separated. That's what he told me from the very beginning. He said you'd grown apart during the pregnancy, that you'd asked him to move out, that you were planning to divorce after the baby was born. Same story Patricia had mentioned earlier. Devin had been feeding Isabella lies about our marriage. He told me the baby might not even be his," Isabella continued. "He said you'd been distant and secretive, and he suspected you'd been having an affair." I felt sick. Devin had painted me as the cheater while he was the one destroying our marriage. But today, Isabella said, when I heard you in that hospital room, calling his name during labor, asking him to hold your hand, you didn't sound like a woman who was separated from her husband. You sounded like a woman who trusted him completely. She reached into her purse and pulled out the necklace, the expensive necklace Devin had bought her. I started asking questions after that, real questions, and everything fell apart. Emma leaned forward. What kind of questions? I asked him for your phone number so I could call and apologize for the misunderstanding. He panicked. Said you were too fragile to handle knowing about us right now. Then I asked to see the separation papers he told me about. He said they were at his lawyer's office. Isabella looked directly at me. But I know lawyers, Marlena. My family owns a business. We deal with legal documents all the time. So I called around. No lawyer in this city has any record of Devin Chen filing for separation or divorce. My heart was racing. Everything Devin had told Isabella was a lie. There's more, Isabella said. That business deal he's always talking about? The one between our companies? My husband never approved it. In fact, he told me yesterday that Devin's company had been eliminated from consideration months ago because someone was leaking their proposals to competitors. Emma and I exchanged glances. Devin had been selling information to competitors, while lying about a business relationship that didn't exist. Your husband has been playing all of us, Isabella continued, using me to get information about my husband's business, using lies about you to justify his behavior, using both of us to get what he wants. She stood up and placed the necklace on my bedside table. I'm leaving him. Today. I already packed my things and moved back in with my sister. But I wanted you to know that I never would have if I'd known the truth about you and the baby. She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Isabella, I said gently, you said you're pregnant. Is it Devin's? She shook her head, looking embarrassed. No, the timing doesn't work. I got pregnant before I even met Devin. The father is... It's complicated, but it's not Devin's baby. Another lie. Devin had brought his pregnant girlfriend to intimidate me into giving up my daughter, but the pregnancy wasn't even his. Why would he claim it was his baby? Emma asked. Because he knew it would hurt you more, Isabella said simply. He wanted you to think he was replacing you and Sophia with a new family. He wanted you to feel like you had nothing left to fight for. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Devin had orchestrated every detail of this afternoon to maximize my pain and make me feel hopeless. There's something else, Isabella said, her voice getting quieter. Those recordings he mentioned, the ones of you being unstable? My stomach dropped. What about them? I helped him make some of them. He would call me while you were in the room, then provoke arguments with you while I was on the line. He was recording both sides of the conversation, but editing out his parts to make it sound like you were just screaming at him for no reason. I felt like I was going to be sick. Devin had been systematically building a case against me, manipulating me into emotional responses so he could use them as evidence of my unfitness as a mother. I didn't know what he was doing at the time, Isabella said quickly. I thought he was just venting about marriage problems, but when he played me some of the recordings earlier today, I realized what he'd been doing. Emma was taking notes furiously. Do you still have access to any of these recordings? I think so. He sends them to an email account that I have the password for. He thinks I don't know about it, but I figured it out weeks ago. This was it. This was the evidence we needed to show the court that Devin was manipulating the situation. Isabella, I said, why are you telling me this? Why are you helping me? She looked down at her hands. Because I know what it's like to be lied to by someone you trust. And because She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Because no mother should have to lose her baby because of a man's lies. After Isabella left, promising to send Emma copies of everything she could access, I sat in stunned silence. The woman I'd thought was my husband's pregnant girlfriend was actually another one of his victims. "We've got him," Emma said, reviewing her notes. "Between Isabella's testimony and the evidence she can provide, we can prove that Devin has been systematically lying and manipulating everyone involved. But even as relief washed over me, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still missing pieces of the puzzle. Devin was too smart, too calculating to put all his eggs in one basket." "Emma," I said, "what if there's more? What if the affair and the custody battle are just part of something bigger?" My sister looked at me seriously. "What do you mean?" Before I could answer, Patricia's phone buzzed again. She looked at it, frowned, then looked up at us with an expression that told me my instincts were right. "That was security again," she said. "They want to talk to you about some irregularities they've noticed in the computer system. Apparently, someone's been accessing patient files without authorization." The pieces were starting to come together, and the picture they were forming was even more terrifying than I'd imagined. 20 minutes later, Detective Sarah Williams from the city police arrived with 2 officers from the hospital's security team. They looked grim, like people who'd uncovered something they hadn't expected to find. "Mrs. Chen," Detective Williams said, settling into a chair beside my bed. "I'm sorry to disturb you so soon after giving birth, but we need to ask you some questions about your husband's activities." Emma immediately went into lawyer mode. "What kind of activities? And why are the police involved?" Detective Williams opened her notebook. "We've been investigating a series of identity theft cases in the city over the past 6 months. Someone has been stealing personal information from hospital patients and their families, then using that information to open credit accounts and take out loans." My blood ran cold. I looked down at Sophia, sleeping peacefully in my arms, and felt a new kind of fear creeping in. "What does this have to do with Devin?" I asked, though part of me was already starting to understand. "The thefts have all occurred at hospitals where your husband has spent significant time," the detective explained. "His business consulting work gives him access to multiple medical facilities, and the pattern of thefts matches his schedule perfectly." Patricia had been standing quietly by the window, but now she stepped forward. "I found something earlier," she said, reaching into her pocket. "After all the drama with the custody papers, I almost forgot about it." She pulled out a small device that looked like a credit card reader. "I found this in the family bathroom after your husband's last visit there. It didn't belong to the hospital, so I called security." Detective Williams examined the device. "This is a card skimmer used to steal credit card information from unsuspecting victims." I stared at the little black device, unable to process what they were telling me. "You think Devin has been stealing from hospital patients?" "We think he's been running an identity theft ring," Detective Williams said. "And we think he's been using his legitimate business access to hospitals to cover his tracks." Emma sat down heavily. "How many victims are we talking about?" 43 confirmed cases so far, the detective replied, "including families who've lost their life savings, young couples whose credit was destroyed before they could buy homes, single mothers who couldn't afford groceries after their accounts were drained." I felt physically sick. Devin hadn't just betrayed me. He'd been preying on vulnerable families during some of the most important and stressful moments of their lives. "The total amount stolen is close to $500,000, Detective Williams continued. "But it's not just about the money. These families' lives have been destroyed. Some have lost their homes, their cars, their ability to get credit for years." I thought about all the hospital visits Devin had made with me during my pregnancy. The routine checkups, the ultrasound appointments, the pre-registration for labor and delivery. Each time, he'd been alone with forms and computers while I was with doctors. "He's been stealing from pregnant women?" I asked, the full horror of it sinking in. "From families having babies?" "Among others, yes," Detective Williams confirmed. "New parents are particularly vulnerable because they're distracted, emotional, and often carrying multiple forms of identification and financial information." Emma was already putting pieces together. The hidden bank account, the expensive apartment with Isabella, the $800 necklace. How was he affording all of this on his salary? "That's exactly what we want to know," the detective said. "Mrs. Chen, we'd like your permission to examine the financial records you found in your husband's laptop." I nodded immediately. "Take whatever you need." Emma opened Devon's laptop and showed Detective Williams the spreadsheet we'd found earlier. "This looked like a client database, but now that you mention identity theft..." The detective studied the screen, her expression growing more serious by the minute. "These aren't business clients. These are victim profiles. Names, addresses, social security numbers, credit information. This is exactly what we've been looking for." As the detective and Emma worked through the laptop files, Patricia came to sit beside my bed. "I keep thinking about all the families I've seen him around over the past months," she said quietly. "Young couples excited about their first babies. Single mothers who are already struggling financially. If he stole from them during what should have been the happiest time of their lives." I held Sophia closer, thinking about how Devon had been in this very hospital just hours ago, probably looking for new victims while I was giving birth to his daughter. "How long has this been going on?" I asked Detective Williams. "Based on the evidence we're seeing here, at least 6 months, maybe longer." She looked up from the laptop screen. "Mrs. Chen, your husband isn't just an adulterer. He's a career criminal who's been funding his double life by destroying innocent families." Emma found another folder on the laptop labeled Future Opportunities. Inside were detailed profiles of upcoming hospital patients, including pregnant women with due dates over the next few months. "He was planning to keep doing this," Emma said, horrified. "These are families who haven't even had their babies yet." Detective Williams stood up. "We have enough evidence to arrest him tonight. Mrs. Chen, I need to ask, do you have any idea where your husband might be right now?" I thought about Devon's confident demeanor when he'd left with his lawyer and Isabella. He'd seemed so sure that his plan was going to work, so certain that he'd backed me into a corner I couldn't escape from. "He thinks he's won," I said. "He thinks I'm going to sign those custody papers because I have no other choice. He's probably celebrating." The detective nodded. "That confidence might work in our favor. People who think they're untouchable often get careless." As if summoned by our conversation, Patricia's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it, then looked up with an expression of grim satisfaction. "That's from Isabella," she said. "She's been forwarding me the emails and recordings she promised, but she also says Devon just sent her a message asking her to meet him at the Riverside Hotel downtown. He wants to celebrate their victory." Detective Williams smiled for the first time since entering the room. "Perfect. We'll be waiting for him." As the police prepared to leave and make their arrest, Emma turned to me with a look of amazement. "Marlena, do you realize what this means? Devon's not just going to lose the custody battle, he's going to prison. For a long time." I looked down at Sophia, my beautiful daughter who had been born into chaos but would grow up free from her father's influence. "How long?" I asked. "Identity theft, wire fraud, computer crimes involving this many victims?" Detective Williams calculated quickly. "He's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. 20 years. By the time Devon got out of prison, Sophia would be in college. We'd have built an entire life without him. A life based on truth and love, instead of lies and manipulation." "There's something else," Emma said. reviewing the custody papers Devin's lawyer had left behind. With him facing federal charges, no judge in the country would award him custody of a child. These papers are worthless now. As the police and detective prepared to leave, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not just hope for survival, but hope for a real future. "Mrs. Chen," Detective Williams said as she reached the door, "I want you to know that your case is going to help us shut down this entire operation. Devin wasn't working alone. There are other people involved, and we're going to get all of them." After everyone left, Emma and I sat in the quiet hospital room with Sophia. The events of the day felt surreal. Waking up in labor, discovering Devin's affair, learning about his criminal activities, and watching my entire life fall apart and rebuild itself in the span of 12 hours. "Emma," I said, "what happens now?" My sister smiled and squeezed my hand. "Now you get to start over. But this time, you're starting from a position of strength, not weakness. You're not the victim of Devin's scheme anymore, Marlena. You're the woman who helped bring down a criminal." As night fell outside the hospital windows, I made a decision that would define the rest of our lives. I wasn't just going to survive Devin's betrayal. I was going to transform it into something meaningful. But first, I was going to watch him face the consequences of every lie he'd told and every life he'd destroyed. The call came at 11:47 p.m. Detective Williams's voice was calm but satisfied when Emma answered the phone and put it on speaker so I could hear. "We got him," she said simply. "Devin Chen is in custody along with 2 accomplices. The arrest went smoothly. He was exactly where Isabella said he'd be, celebrating at the Riverside Hotel." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I didn't even know was there. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt truly safe. "What happens next?" Emma asked. "He'll be arraigned tomorrow morning on multiple federal charges: identity theft, wire fraud, computer crimes, conspiracy, and racketeering. The evidence you provided was crucial. We found additional victims and more stolen money than we initially thought." I shifted Sophia to my other arm, marveling at how peacefully she slept, despite the chaos surrounding her birth. She had no idea that her father was a criminal, or that her mother had just helped bring down a major fraud operation. "How much more?" I asked. "Total damages are now estimated at over $800,000. 67. Confirmed victims across 4 states. This wasn't just a local operation, Mrs. Chen. Your husband was part of a sophisticated criminal network that's been operating for over 2 years. 2 years. Devin had been living a double life for our entire marriage, stealing from innocent families, while coming home to me every night and pretending to be a devoted husband." "The judge denied bail," Detective Williams continued. "Given the scope of the crimes and the risk of flight, Devin will remain in custody until trial. His assets have been frozen, and we're working to recover as much stolen money as possible for the victims." After we hung up, Emma and I sat in stunned silence. It was over. Really over. Devin couldn't hurt us anymore, couldn't threaten to take Sophia, couldn't destroy any more families. "I can't believe it," I said. "This morning I thought my biggest problem was a cheating husband. Now you've helped the FBI shut down a major criminal operation," Emma finished. "Marlena, do you realize how many families you've probably saved? How many people won't have their lives destroyed because you had the courage to expose Devin?" I looked down at Sophia, thinking about all the babies who would be born in the coming months, whose parents wouldn't have their identities stolen, their savings drained, their futures compromised. In a strange way, Devin's betrayal had led to something good. The next morning brought a stream of visitors I hadn't expected. Isabella arrived first, looking relieved but exhausted. "I wanted to thank you," she said, sitting down beside my bed. "For believing me yesterday. For letting me help. I know it couldn't have been easy." "You saved us," I said honestly. "If you hadn't come forward with the truth about the recordings and the business deal, Devin might have gotten away with taking Sophia." Isabella smiled sadly. "I keep thinking about how different things might have been if I'd asked the right questions from the beginning, if I'd demanded to see those separation papers, or insisted on meeting you." "Devin was very good at manipulation," I said. "You weren't the only one who believed his lies." Patricia knocked and entered with a breakfast tray and another visitor, Dr. Amanda Foster, the head of the hospital's patient services department. "Mrs. Chen," Dr. Foster said, "I wanted to personally apologize for what happened in our facility. The fact that someone was able to use our hospital to prey on patients and their families is unacceptable." "It's not your fault," I said. Devin was very careful to hide what he was doing. "Still, we're implementing new security measures to make sure this never happens again. And we wanted to do something for you, to recognize what you've done for our community." She handed me an envelope. "This is a formal offer for a position with our new patient advocacy program. We're creating a department specifically to help families who've been victimized by financial crimes, and we think your experience would be invaluable." I stared at the envelope, hardly believing what I was hearing. "You're offering me a job?" "A career," Dr. Foster corrected. "With full benefits, housing assistance, and a salary that would allow you to support yourself and Sophia comfortably. You understand what these families are going through better than anyone." Emma was practically bouncing with excitement. "Marlena, this is perfect. You'd be helping other people while building a stable life for you and Sophia." But I was scared. 12 hours ago, I'd thought I had my life figured out. Now, everything was different. My marriage was over, my husband was in prison, and I was being offered a chance to start completely over. "I know it's overwhelming," Dr. Foster said gently. "Take some time to think about it. The position will be here when you're ready." After she left, Isabella lingered behind. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. "How did you do it? How did you find the strength to fight back when everything was falling apart?" I thought about her question seriously. "I looked at Sophia," I said finally, "and I realized that she deserved better than a father who thought she was disposable. That gave me something worth fighting for." Isabella touched her own pregnant belly. "I hope I can be that strong when my baby comes." "You already are," I said. "You proved that yesterday when you chose to tell the truth instead of going along with Devin's lies." After Isabella left, Emma helped me review the job offer. The salary was more than I'd ever made as a teacher. The benefits included health insurance, life insurance, and a retirement plan. There was even a small apartment on the hospital campus, available for new employees. "This is amazing, Marlena," Emma said. "You'd be completely independent, able to provide for Sophia, with meaningful work that helps other people." "But what if I'm not ready for this? What if I fail?" Emma took my hand. "What if you succeed? What if you turn the worst experience of your life into something that helps hundreds of other families?" That afternoon, Detective Williams called with an update that put everything in perspective. "I thought you'd want to know," she said. "We've been hearing from victims all day. Families whose lives were destroyed by Devin's operation. When they learned that his own wife was the one who exposed him, several of them asked me to pass along messages." She read me a letter from a young mother named Sarah, whose identity had been stolen 3 days after her son was born. "Please tell Mrs. Chen that because of her courage, my family is going to be okay. The money we lost has been recovered, and knowing that the person who hurt us is in prison gives us closure. But more than that, knowing that another mother understood our pain and fought for justice gives us hope. Thank you for being strong when we couldn't be." By the time Detective Williams finished reading the third similar letter, I was crying. "There are 17 more," she said gently, all saying basically the same thing. "You didn't just save your own family, Mrs. Chen. You saved all of theirs." So, that evening, as I prepared to spend my second night in the hospital with Sophia, I made my decision. I called Dr. Foster and accepted the position. "I want to help," I told her. "I want to make sure no other family goes through what we went through." As I held Sophia and watched the sunset through the hospital window, I realized that Devon's betrayal had led to something he never could have predicted. It had shown me who I really was. Not just a victim, but a fighter. Not just a survivor, but someone who could help other people survive too. The worst day of my life had become the first day of my real life, and it was going to be beautiful. 3 days later, I was finally ready to take Sophia home from the hospital, except I didn't have a home to take her to. The house was still in Devon's name, and with him in federal custody facing criminal charges, all his assets had been frozen pending the investigation. Emma had been working with the prosecutor's office to get me temporary access, but it could take weeks to sort out the legal mess Devon had created. "You're both staying with me until we figure this out," Emma said firmly as she helped me pack the few belongings I had at the hospital. "My apartment isn't huge, but it's safe and it's ours." Patricia knocked on the door frame. "Ready to go, honey?" I looked around the hospital room that had been my world for the past 3 days. This was where I'd given birth to Sophia, where I'd discovered Devon's betrayal, where I'd learned about his crimes, and where I'd found the strength to fight back. In a strange way, this room had been the birthplace of more than just my daughter. It had been where I became the person I was meant to be. "Ready," I said, but before we could leave, Patricia handed me a small wrapped package. "This is from all the nurses on the maternity ward," she said. "We wanted you to have something to remember that despite everything that happened, something wonderful came out of this experience." Inside was a silver locket with Sophia's birth date engraved on it. When I opened it, there was a tiny photo of Sophia and me from her first day of life, both of us looking tired but peaceful. "Thank you," I whispered, tears starting to fall. "For everything. If you hadn't shown me that receipt, you would have figured it out eventually," Patricia said, squeezing my hand. "Strong women like you always do. But I'm glad I could help you figure it out sooner rather than later." As we prepared to leave, Dr. Foster appeared with another surprise. "I know you don't officially start work for another month," she said, "but I wanted to give you this." She handed me a key card and a small folder. "The apartment I mentioned is ready now if you want it. It's fully furnished, and the hospital, daycare has a spot reserved for Sophia whenever you're ready." I stared at the key card, hardly believing it was real. "You mean we can move in today?" "Today, next week, whenever you're ready. It's yours for as long as you need it." Emma looked as amazed as I felt. "Marlena, this is incredible. You'll have your own place, a good job, security for you and Sophia." An hour later, I was standing in the doorway of a small but beautiful one-bedroom apartment on the hospital campus. It had a living room with big windows that let in lots of natural light, a modern kitchen, and a separate area that was perfect for Sophia's nursery. "It's not fancy," Dr. Foster said, "but it's safe and comfortable, and you'll be close to work when you're ready to start." I walked through the rooms, Sophia sleeping peacefully in my arms, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real, concrete hope for the future. "It's perfect," I said. "It's absolutely perfect." That evening, as Emma helped me settle in, my phone rang. It was Detective Williams with an update on Devon's case. "The preliminary hearing was this morning," she said. "Devon's lawyer tried to argue for reduced charges, but with the evidence we have, the judge wasn't buying it. He's being held without bail until trial, which is scheduled for next month." "What's he saying about everything?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "He's maintaining his innocence, claiming he was just a small player in someone else's operation. But the evidence tells a different story. The laptop, the recordings, the financial records, everything points to him being one of the main organizers." Detective Williams paused. "There is one thing you should know. He's asked to see you." My stomach clenched. "What?" "Prisoners are allowed to request visits from family members. He's put in a formal request to see you and the baby. You're under no obligation to agree, and frankly, I'd advise against it." I looked down at Sophia, thinking about the man who had helped create her but had never really been her father. "I don't want to see him. Not now. Maybe not ever." "You're right," Detective Williams said. "I'll let the prison know you've declined the visit." After I hung up, Emma and I sat on the couch in my new living room, watching Sophia sleep in her portable crib. "Do you think you'll ever want to see him?" Emma asked. "Even years from now?" I thought about it seriously. Maybe someday, when Sophia is older and has questions about her father. But right now, I just want to focus on building our life. A life based on truth instead of lies. "What? Will you tell her about him when she's old enough to ask?" "The truth," I said without hesitation. "That her father made some very bad choices that hurt a lot of people, including us. But that those choices led us to a better life. And that she is loved, completely and unconditionally, by the family that matters." The next few weeks passed in a blur of adjustment and recovery. I spent my days learning to be a mother, figuring out feeding schedules and sleep patterns, marveling at every tiny change in Sophia's development. Emma visited every day after work, helping with groceries and laundry, and just being there when I needed someone to talk to. Isabella called once a week to check on us and to update me on her own situation. She'd moved back to California to be near her sister and was preparing for her baby's arrival. The father had finally stepped up and wanted to be involved, and Isabella was cautiously optimistic about their future. "I keep thinking about what you said," she told me during one of our calls, "about finding strength in wanting something better for your child. It's helping me make better choices this time." 2 weeks before I was scheduled to start work, Patricia stopped by with news that would change my perspective on everything that had happened. "I wanted to tell you this in person," she said, sitting down at my kitchen table while Sophia napped nearby. "We've been contacted by several other hospitals that want to implement similar victim services programs. They want you to help train their staff." I stared at her. "They want me to help other hospitals?" "They want you to share your story, to help medical professionals recognize the warning signs of financial crimes targeting patients. Your experience could prevent what happened to you from happening to other families." The idea was overwhelming but also exciting. I could help protect other women, other families, other vulnerable people who might otherwise become victims. "There's more," Patricia continued. "The FBI wants to use your case as a training example for their financial crimes division. They want to show other agents how important it is to listen to victims and follow up on seemingly small pieces of evidence." I thought about that receipt, the small piece of paper that had started everything. If Patricia hadn't shown it to me, if I hadn't had the courage to confront Devin, how many more families would have been destroyed? "And there's something else," Patricia said with a smile. "The state is considering new legislation to strengthen protections for hospital patients' personal information. They're calling it the Sophia Protection Act." I felt tears starting to fall. "They're naming it after my daughter?" "They're naming it after both of you, the mother and daughter who helped expose a criminal operation and protect other families." That night, as I fed Sophia her bedtime bottle, I thought about the journey we'd been on together. 3 weeks ago, she'd been born into chaos and betrayal. Now she was the inspiration for legislation that would protect other children and families. You know what, baby girl? I whispered to her. Your father thought that receipt would never be seen. He was wrong about that, just like he was wrong about everything else. But his biggest mistake was underestimating what his betrayal would turn us into. I looked around. Our small apartment, at the life we were building together, at the future full of purpose and meaning that stretched ahead of us. We're not just survivors, Sophia. We're protectors. We're the ones who make sure other families don't have to go through what we went through. And that's something beautiful. We're not just survivors, Sophia. We're protectors. We're the ones who make sure other families don't have to go through what we went through. And that's something beautiful. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my office at Riverside General Hospital, reviewing case files for the families I'm helping through our victim services program. Sophia is in the hospital daycare, just down the hall, babbling and laughing with the other children. She's healthy, happy, and completely unaware of the chaos that surrounded her birth. The Identity Theft Victims Program has helped 47 families so far, including many of Devon's victims. Watching these families rebuild their lives has been both heartbreaking and inspiring. I've learned that resilience isn't about not falling down. It's about how you choose to get back up. Devon was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to multiple charges of identity theft, wire fraud, and racketeering. The judge called his crimes a systematic exploitation of families during their most vulnerable moments. He'll be eligible for parole in 12 years, but I'm not concerned about that. By then, Sophia will be a teenager, and we'll have built a life so strong that his return won't shake our foundation. The divorce was finalized 4 months ago. Thanks to Emma's brilliant legal work and the evidence we'd gathered, I was awarded full custody of Sophia, plus half of all marital assets that weren't tied up in Devon's criminal activities. The house was sold, and my portion of the proceeds went into a trust fund for Sophia's education. Isabella kept her word and divorced her husband. She moved to California and started a nonprofit organization that helps women escape manipulative relationships. We exchange emails occasionally, bonding over our shared experience of Devon's deception. She had her baby, a beautiful daughter named Grace, and she's found peace in her new life. I'm genuinely happy for her. Marcus Martinez's company ended up being one of our biggest supporters. When he learned how Devon had manipulated his wife and stolen from his business, he donated $100,000 to our victim services program. No family should have to go through what you and Isabella went through, he told me. But the most surprising development came 3 months ago when Patricia approached me with an idea that would change my life in ways I never expected. Marlena, she said, sitting down in my office with her usual warm smile, I'm retiring next month. I felt a pang of sadness. Patricia had become like a second mother to me, and I couldn't imagine the hospital without her steady presence. But before I go, she continued, I want to give you something. She handed me a thick folder filled with letters, dozens of them. These are from families you've helped, she explained. They wanted you to know how much your work has meant to them. I opened the first letter, from a young mother named Sarah, whose identity had been stolen 2 days after her son was born. Dear Marlena, when I first met you, I was drowning in debt that wasn't mine, scared that I'd never be able to provide for my baby. You didn't just help me navigate the legal system. You showed me that survival is possible, that we can rebuild even when everything falls apart. My son is 8 months old now, and when he smiles at me, I remember that joy is still possible. After betrayal, thank you for showing me how to be strong. I read letter after letter, each one telling a story of recovery, of families who had found their way back to stability and happiness. By the time I finished, I was crying. You've found your calling, Patricia said softly. This work, helping these families, it's transformed you. She was right. The broken, devastated woman who had given birth to Sophia 6 months ago was gone. In her place was someone stronger, more compassionate, more purposeful than I'd ever been before. "There's something else," Patricia said. "The hospital board wants to expand the victim services program. They're talking about opening satellite offices in 3 other cities, and they want you to head up the entire initiative." I stared at her. "You mean..." "I mean you'd be running a regional program that could help thousands of families. You'd have a team of counselors, legal advocates, and financial advisors working under you. It would be a significant promotion with a salary that would set you and Sophia up for life." That evening, as I fed Sophia her bottle in our little apartment, I thought about how much our lives had changed. 6 months ago, I'd been a betrayed wife with no money, no home, and no clear future. Now I was being offered the chance to lead a program that could help families across 3 states. But more than that, I discovered something about myself that I never knew existed. I was capable of not just surviving betrayal, but transforming it into something meaningful. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Emma. "How's my favorite sister doing?" she asked. "Good," I said, bouncing Sophia gently. "Really good, actually." "I have some news," Emma said. "Remember Devin's business partner, the one who was supposed to split the profits from the identity theft operation with him? The one who was never caught? That's the one. Well, the FBI just arrested him. Turns out Devin kept detailed records of everyone involved, probably as insurance in case he got caught. The whole operation is finally shut down." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I didn't even know was there. "So it's really over?" "It's really over," Emma confirmed. "You and Sophia are completely safe now." After we hung up, I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there were families dealing with their own betrayals, their own moments of discovery that their lives weren't what they thought they were. But there were also families who were healing, who were building new lives from the pieces of their old ones. Families who had learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can lead to the best thing you never saw coming. I kissed the top of Sophia's head and made my decision about the promotion. I was going to take it. Not just for us, but for all the families who needed someone to show them that survival was possible, that joy could exist after betrayal, that strength could be found in the most unexpected places. As I put Sophia to bed in her crib, the same crib that Devin and I had picked out together when we thought we were building a life as partners, I realized it had become something different. It wasn't a symbol of the family that was destroyed. It was a symbol of the family that Sophia and I were building together. A family built on truth, strength, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her daughter. As I watched her sleep, I whispered the words that had become my promise to both of us. "Your father thought that receipt would never be seen. He was wrong about that, just like he was wrong about everything else. But his biggest mistake was underestimating what his betrayal would turn us into. Survivors who help other survivors, stronger than he ever imagined we could be." I turned off the light and looked around our home. Small but filled with love, built on honesty instead of lies, grounded in hope instead of fear. Outside, the city hummed with life, with families, facing their own challenges and celebrating their own victories. Tomorrow, I would call Dr. Foster and accept the promotion. I would build a program that could help thousands of families recover from financial crimes. I would train other advocates, share our story, and make sure that what happened to us would help prevent the same thing from happening to others. But tonight, I was simply a mother watching her daughter sleep, grateful for the journey that had brought us here, and excited about the future we were going to build together. Devin had thought he was destroying my life when he betrayed me. Instead, he had given me the chance to discover who I really was and who I was meant to become. and that person was someone beautiful. That's Marlena's incredible story of how the worst betrayal of her life led to protecting dozens of other families and finding her true purpose. Sometimes our darkest moments show us who we're really meant to become. I'd love to know, where are you listening from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Your support means everything to creators like me who are trying to spread stories of hope and resilience. If Marlena's journey inspired you, please hit that like button to help this story reach other people who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Every subscription helps us share more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. There's another powerful story waiting for you right now. Click on the video appearing on your screen to discover how one woman's act of kindness changed an entire community. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Keep spreading kindness, and I'll see you in the next story.